If you stumbled across this video, you're probably already using a tool like ChatGPT or maybe Perplexity, and you're probably starting to ask yourself the question, do I really need something like Jasper AI? Or is it just another tool doing the same thing for more money? And it's a fair question, and the answer isn't always a simple yes or no. Here's the thing. Jasper and tools like ChatGPT might look similar on the surface, but the reality is that they're fundamentally very different. In this video, I'll walk you through a live demo of creating content with both Jasper and ChatGPT to show you the key differences and show you where Jasper can provide additional value beyond what a large language model like ChatGPT can provide. This isn't about pitching one tool over the other, it's about giving you clarity to decide when an extra tool like Jasper AI makes sense and when it doesn't. And for those of you new here, welcome to the channel. The goal of our channel is simple: help others explore real-world ways small businesses and individuals can actually use AI to drive value. So whether you're a solo entrepreneur or running a growing team, we look to cut through the noise, test out tools, and figure out what's actually worth your time and money. So before we jump into our demo, it's important to understand how Jasper differs from tools like ChatGPT. So whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, or maybe Perplexity, these are what we refer to as large language models. Think of them as incredibly smart engines, where we give them a prompt, they give us an answer. So Jasper uses these same engines, but it's not a model itself. It's a layer built on top of these engines. So this leads us to our first key difference with Jasper, and that is that these tools like ChatGPT and other LLMs are designed to be incredibly broad. Every day, millions of people ask these platforms everything from what should I eat for dinner to can you help me write this code. Jasper, on the other hand, doesn't just rely on one model. It uses a multi-model setup and fine-tunes these engines specifically for marketing tasks. So instead of trying to get a general AI model to act like a copywriter, maybe a strategist, or a brand voice expert, Jasper starts much closer to the finish line because the underlying models have already been optimized for content creation. So instead of relying on one model for everything, it picks the best model for the job. So maybe Gemini is strong at handling, say, short-form captions, and Claude might excel at long-form storytelling. This will add an additional layer of value for Jasper users due to the fact that Jasper will help to automatically route these tasks to the most optimized fit. So without wasting any more time, let's jump over into our demo, where what we're going to be doing today is comparing what it would be like to create marketing content with ChatGPT, and then looking at how that then compares to using a tool like Jasper AI. But before we actually create any content, it's important to take a step back and first understand what does the actual setup of these tools look like to ultimately allow us to create that content that's aligned with the way we want to speak to our customers and the way in which we represent ourselves as a brand. So to get started here, let's first take a look at what that process looks like inside of Jasper. So what we'll do is we'll first come down here to our Jasper IQ settings. And really the best way to think about the IQ settings is it's almost like your brand's creative brief on autopilot. So imagine you were to hire a blog writer for your company. You'd have to explain, who is your company, what are the values of your company, who are the individuals you're speaking to. And what Jasper is doing here is it's really centralizing all of that for us. So it allows us to get in depth on, again, who are our customers, who are we talking to, what is the way in which we want to talk to those customers, and even doing things like providing examples, previous marketing material where we've used that brand voice or we've targeted a specific audience. In our example today, I want to focus on three kind of key areas as part of this IQ section here. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at the brand voice, the audience, and the knowledge base. So starting out, let's jump into our section here for our brand voice. So now, again, taking a look here at our brand voice, this is where, again, we're really going to start to define how we want to speak to our audience. And what you'll notice here is I've already gone ahead and I have designed a brand voice for our company here, which is going to be Bright Path Home. So if we take a look at this, the first thing we're going to do is provide that description of, again, the way in which or the how we want to speak or kind of present ourselves really to our audience. So we can define that, we can describe what that's going to look like and ensure that, again, when we are creating content, it's really staying within the boundaries of our brand voice. We've all seen examples where companies have generated content and it clearly screams, hey, this was generated with AI. Really the goal here is to ensure that, okay, we can leverage AI and we can leverage automation, but it's staying consistent in the way in which we actually speak to, again, our audience. So we can add that description, and then down here, what we can do is we can provide examples of, again, previous content where we've utilized that brand voice, which Jasper can then use to ensure that, again, we have consistency with that brand voice. So it'll take, obviously, a look at our description, but it'll also look at previous examples to understand how Jasper should be applying that brand voice to new content that's going to be generated. So that's our first part. What we'll do next is we'll jump back to our IQ settings, where the next thing we'll take a look at here is our audience. And so This is of course going to be very critical. So in our example here, what we're doing is we're looking at the example of a real estate company. And I would say pretty much for majority of businesses, whether it's a mid-sized business or a small business, or maybe just yourself running the business, the way in which you of course talk to different audiences or different customers is likely going to be very different. So in our example here with real estate, we're likely going to talk to new customers a lot different compared to how we would talk to our current customers. And so one of the things that Jasper allows us to do is it gives us the ability to add multiple audiences. In this case here, I am not on the plan that allows multiple audiences, but I think if you are going to use a tool like Jasper over something like ChatGPT, over time you're going to get to the point where you scale, where you likely want to go to that next tier, which allows you to create multiple audiences. And within our audience, really the one thing I want to highlight here is the level of detail we can add when it comes to actually describing who our audience is. So again, it gives us the framework, and then what we do is we then input all the information defining, again, who actually is our audience. So we're going to provide the description of our audience. In this case here, it's going to be looking for those net new customers, very focused on first-time home buyers. We can then add things like our core messaging. So when we're looking at this audience, what is kind of the message that we want to provide to them? And it even goes as far as looking at things like objections and responses. So when we are looking to get net new clientele, what are the common objections that we come across? And so what we can do is we can define what are those common objections, which as a business we usually know and we understand in a lot of detail, and how we want to respond to those common objections when we're creating different content. So again, it's giving us the framework and then allowing us to go in extreme detail to actually define who we are actually speaking to. The last part we'll notice here is going to be the knowledge base. So this is where we can upload previous content and examples or guidelines, which then again, Jasper can reference as we're starting to create new content. So this is, again, really where we're defining, again, that kind of centralized place inside of Jasper of how we want to represent ourselves as a brand and how we want to speak to different clientele or different audiences. So what we'll do next here is we'll navigate over to ChatGPT to take a closer look at, okay, if we wanted to, say we didn't want to use a tool like Jasper AI, how close can we get with creating, again, a similar level of customization that we've seen here with Jasper AI in a tool like ChatGPT? So what we'll do is we'll come over here to ChatGPT. And of course, one of the important things to note about ChatGPT is, of course, we're going to have our personalization settings. So this is where we can come in here, we can personalize our ChatGPT, but the thing I really want to focus on here is going to be our memory. So this is where it can save, certain context or certain chat history. What I can also do is I can manage and edit that memory. So of course, this will give me a level of personalization when it comes to my experience with ChatGPT. So if I want to give it certain instructions, or if I wanted to know something about myself or my brand, I can provide it that context. The key thing here, though, is this does not scale. So if we are in scenarios where we do have, again, multiple individuals in our company that are creating content and we want consistency across that content, well, this memory here is specific to my ChatGPT account. So if we want to get anywhere close to what Jasper AI is doing, likely what we're going to want to do is turn our attention here to our custom GPTs. That's what we're going to be looking at here. So we'll click on Explore, and what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to create custom GPTs. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with GPTs, really it gives us a way to have more of a customized chat. So rather than just sending in a prompt and coming in here and creating a new chat, what we're doing is we're defining what we want to see happen in that chat. So what I've done here is I have gone ahead and I have created a new custom GPT. So I'll come to my GPTs, and what we'll do is we'll open up the GPT I have created here for Bright Path Home. So the first thing we'll notice here is simply giving it a name. What I've done next is I've then inputted the description. So essentially what is the role or goal of this GPT? So when, again, users are interacting with it, or when I'm trying to generate content, what is kind of the persona of this GPT that I want it to play? Really what we want to focus on here, though, is going to be our instructions. So what we saw with Jasper was the ability to define things like our brand voice, potentially also define things like different audiences. And we saw the level of detail we were able to go into with Jasper. So when creating a custom GPT, all of that is going to be inputted here in our instructions. So this is where we can give it instructions on, again, the brand voice, how we want to talk to our audience, who we're talking to, and all of the things that we saw within Jasper. Theoretically, you can input all of that here in our instructions with our GPT. The obvious difference we're going to notice right off the bat is the lack of structure we're going to get here with GPT, where Jasper is obviously a company that is focused on working with marketers and different organizations, so they really have experience of, okay, when we are generating the custom content, this is kind of the structure that we need to define to be successful. Where with ChatGPT, we kind of have this kind of blank canvas here where we can input all this information, but we don't have any consistent structure to follow. That's going to be the big difference that we'll notice here. If we close that out, the next thing we'll notice is going to be the knowledge. So very similar to what we saw with Jasper, we're going to have the ability to upload knowledge, which in this case here, our GPT can then reference as it's giving us different feedback on the prompts that we're generating or helping us to generate new content. The other thing that we want to, of course, turn our attention to here is the recommended model. And this is where we're going to be actually selecting the model that we want this GPT to use. In this case, I've selected 5.1. So this is obviously going to be a huge difference between Jasper and what we're going to get here with creating our GPT. So with our GPT, we're going to be leveraging one model, where at the start of the video, we mentioned that with a tool like Jasper, it has that multi-model approach. So depending on the task, it can then determine, okay, which model is the strongest at helping us solve or create content for a certain task, and it'll automatically route that task, again, to the model that is most suited to basically get the most optimized content. Where again, what we're seeing here is we only have the ability to select one model, so that is going to be a huge difference that, especially over time, we'll start to notice when we start to create more and more content with Jasper, especially when it comes to creating different forms of content. The other thing that we'll notice down here at the bottom is the ability to create actions. So we won't go super in depth with this in this video here because it does become a lot more technical. But basically with actions in GPT, this allows us to plug into different servers and leverage potentially custom APIs that we might want to integrate with our GPT. With Jasper, we're not necessarily going to have the ability to create custom APIs, but Jasper does have a lot of pre-built-in integrations. So for many individuals and small businesses, that's going to be super beneficial because those integrations and connections to maybe things like your Shopify have already been created for you, and you don't need to be extremely technical and going, configure the connection with the different platforms yourselves. So that's obviously one thing that we're going to want to keep in mind. And one other thing that I want to quickly point our attention to before we move into actually creating content is the conversation starters that we have within our GPT. So what you can see here is I've gone ahead and created a few different conversation starters. And whenever we create a conversation starter for our GPT, that is going to pop up as an option here for the actual end user to select to basically kick off the process of generating our content. So if I wanted to create an Instagram caption, I can come in and click help me write an Instagram caption. And again, that will basically kick off the conversation that I'm going to have with this GPT to ultimately help me create that content. So again, easy way to kick off the process. The big challenge I see with this is simply scalability. So if we have 20 different types of content that we generate frequently, well, it's not really going to be feasible to have 20 different conversation starters. It's going to be much faster for the end user to come in, type out a conversation starter themselves rather than having to search through or look through all those different conversation starters. So what Jasper does instead is they provide apps. And so what these apps do is they essentially give us structure when we're creating the content. So if I want to say create an Instagram caption, I can search for that, and you can see here that they've already got a pre-built-in app. And so one, it's going to provide me the structure, so giving them the required details that they need to help me create this caption. And then what it'll also allow them to do is provide their marketing expertise that their platform offers for this specific type of content generation. So again, much more scalable with Jasper, and what we can see is just a simple scale of it. Again, in this case here, we've got over 100 different apps that we can choose from. So now let's jump into actually creating some content leveraging the app. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead here and we'll create an Instagram caption. So we'll click on use, and what we'll do is we'll imagine the scenario that we want to create an Instagram caption for a new post that we're going to be doing that's going to be relating to a new real estate development project that's going to be coming out. But what we want to do for this caption is essentially just tease that release of that new project that's going to be coming out. One of the things that we'll notice here is to get started, what we can do is we can leverage project settings. So this is where maybe relating to that specific real estate development project, maybe we want to make a series of posts over time. So they're all essentially tying to the same project. And for those series of posts, we likely want to have consistency in terms of things like our brand voice and audience. So that's where we can use the project settings to, again, have consistency across the entire campaign rather than coming in for each individual post and inputting things like the brand voice and the audience. So again, really just tying into that overall theme of scalability scalability. In our case here, we're going to be creating one caption. So what we'll do is we will focus on the app settings over here on the side of the screen. So what we'll do here first is we'll first select our brand voice, which is going to be the one we created earlier for Bright Path Homes. Next, what we'll do is we'll select our audience. In this example, we're going to focus on net new customers. We can then select the language that we want the content to be generated in. But then what we'll notice down here is we can upload 10 sources of material to help guide the content and the overall accuracy. So what we saw previously in the setup in our Jasper IQ settings is when we were creating things like the brand voice, we had the ability to provide examples or previous examples of our brand voice in action, which Jasper could then use to ensure that future content has consistency with the overall brand voice. We also have our setting here where we could then upload knowledge, so things like company information and different assets, which Jasper could then utilize to ensure that we're creating customized, tailored content for our organization. What we can do here is we can then take that a step further. So in our example, we're focusing on a specific real estate development project. So maybe in this scenario, what we want to do is upload material about that specific project to, again, give Jasper extra context to ensure that the content that they're going to be generating is very relevant to that project. What we'll then notice is here we can then add in our key message. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste in our key message, which in this case is going to be there's a new real estate development project that is going to be hitting the market soon, which offers great options for first-time home buyers. What we can then do is add in additional content. So if we want any hashtags or mentions that we want to ensure are part of the caption that's going to be generated, we can add that in here. And then finally, what we'll look at here is we can then generate the length. In this case, I'm going to leave it as none. So I'll leave that basically up to Jasper to use their expertise to determine the length. But if we do have a very specific length, maybe for a blog post, this is a great feature to leverage to ensure that it stays within the length that we give it. So what we'll do next is we will go ahead and we will click on generate now. And so Jasper is then going to take all of that context while also considering things like our brand voice and our audience to go ahead and generate our Instagram caption. So now that we've created some content in Jasper, what we'll do next is we'll jump over to the GPT that we created to see what the process would be like if we were to, again, leverage ChatGPT rather than Jasper. So what we'll do here is we'll start by clicking our conversation starter. So we're going to say, help me write an Instagram caption. And so what our GPT is going to do here is it's going to ask for additional context. One thing that I do want to highlight is when we were doing this within Jasper, we had the ability to select things like our brand voice as well as our audience that we're targeting. And so yes, within our GPT, within the setup, we can provide information on different types of audiences and maybe different types of brand voices. But if we want to actually just focus on a certain audience, we would have to include that in the prompt rather than in Jasper, we can come in and we can just make that selection. So again, we can kind of get to a similar end result, but it's much more reliant on the end user doing more manual work to be able to get there. So now that we've typed in our conversation starter, ChatGPT has followed up with some additional questions. And what I'll do here is I will then give it our key message as the additional context. So we'll come into our chat down here and we'll input that. And so what our GPT has done here is it's now automatically generated an Instagram caption. Again, leveraging all of that information we previously gave it in the when we were creating the GPT, along with the additional context that I've given it here. So of course, the example we generated in our custom GPT is obviously going to differ from the output we got with Jasper AI. But these are obviously, again, just examples. And as we've highlighted in this video, every brand has their own unique voice. For those who want to go a step further of comparing Jasper to a large language model, I would suggest going through this exercise yourself, where you create something like a custom GPT, sign up for a free trial with Jasper, to then compare the content that you generate to see which one is more suited for your unique situation. But for me, the key difference between using a tool like Jasper compared to a large language model like ChatGPT really comes down to your workflow and your volume. If you're a solo creator and you only need AI every now and then, a tool like ChatGPT or Gemini is probably going to be more than enough. But if you're a business that is growing or you're producing content at a high volume, Jasper becomes worth its weight in gold. The consistency, structure, built-in brand voice, and audience targeting all compound as you begin to scale. It's like having a marketing assistant plugged directly into your brand, and for teams on a growth trajectory, the time savings and quality boost can be a game changer. That's all for today's video, but if you found the breakdown to be helpful, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be covering a lot more real-world AI tools, comparisons, and demos, just like the one we've done here to help individuals use AI more effectively. And if you did get some value out of the video, be sure to leave a thumbs up. And again, thank you for watching, and we hope to see you next time.